All right, well, it says we're recording, so let's get it going. Evan, welcome, brother. Thank you so much for being here. This is awesome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it,
Yeah,
Eric.
man. So tell everybody where you're at right now, actually, in the world.
Yeah, I work for a company, a healthcare startup in the medical cannabis industry.
Nice.
I've probably been in the industry for about 4 years now. So started as more as a patient educator,
Mm-hmm.
more on the counseling with different products of medical cannabis and how to take them and just in their whole medical profile. But then I kind of moved more into the corporate world. So I kind of head up IT and operations for the company's called Ekosi Health.
Mm-hmm.
We focus on kind of looking at cannabis as a tool, especially in the areas of harm reduction, opioid replacement therapy,
Mm.
mental and mood disorders, insomnia disorders. So really taking cannabis to a frontline medication
Yeah, man.
instead of pharmaceuticals, right? And
Mm-hmm.
looking at it as a replacement altogether for patients who maybe have been on different cascades of pharmaceuticals for 25 years and nothing's really moving forward for them, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, seriously, man. It's I think that's the future, is using the plant medicines. That's like such a hippy dippy term, but like the plant medicines, compounds that we've been using as human beings for thousands of years. And just because some dude said they're illegal, now we can't use them. I was talking to my buddy Tom on the last podcast where,
mhm,
specifically about psychedelics and mushrooms. And if
yeah,
we did evolve from apes using mushrooms, it's kind of a crazy theory proposed by Terence McKenna.
yeah,
Then if
yeah.
that is how the human brain developed through millions of years of, because I'm sure you know all about neurogenesis and how it creates new brain cells and the brain grows. Well, if that's the case, wouldn't these compounds be like a vitamin for us?
Exactly. And it's funny you say that because when we look at cannabis, like all you're really doing with cannabis is supplementing your endocannabinoid system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really taking like a perspective or paradigm shift into looking at things like mushrooms, like psilocybin or cannabis is really like part of your diet,
Yeah.
not even like a medication. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's almost a necessity for the health of consciousness, right?
Mm.
And quality
Yeah.
of life altogether.
Yeah. Because, as someone who's used cannabis for 7, 8 years, I definitely have seen both sides of it, where you're a high school kid and you're like, start smoking weed and it's like all fun. But then as you become an adult and you kind of back away from, as far as like recreational smoking weed just to smoke weed, whereas it's almost like you said, it's because we have cannabinoid systems and receptors in our body already. So it's almost like we are meant to use them in the right way, in these like shamanic type ways.
Exactly. Like we produce molecules inside our body called endogenous cannabinoids, or the ones internal,
Yeah.
and they're very similar to the ones that are in cannabis, which are phytocannabinoids that
Mm-hmm.
come from a plant, right? There's two predominant ones they've discovered: anandamide,
Okay.
which comes from the Sanskrit term ananda, which is bliss.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that was actually discovered in Israel.
Okay.
Dr. Raphael McCullum.
Okay.
He was the leading kind of discoverer who isolated THC, and then you were able to find the receptor that molecule bound to in the body, which is the CB1 and CB2 receptors. Those are
Wow.
the two we have. Yeah, and then they could figure out what chemicals inside our body bind to those receptors.
Mm.
So yeah, and it's funny because when you look at supporting your endocannabinoid system through lifestyle, right? Like diet, exercise,
Right.
nutrition. It's interesting because a lot of the endocannabinoids are synthesized from omega threes, and we're typically deficient in omega threes in our
Yeah.
society as a whole. So yeah, it's pretty profound that we have a system that really only cannabinoids interact with,
Yeah.
right?
So real quick, because omega threes, that's something I take in like a capsule form, like the omega-3 fish fatty acids or whatever. Can correct me if I'm wrong, but can you can get omega-3s from cannabis? Do you have to eat it? Like, how do you what's the method of ingesting to receive
So
that?
yeah, so omega threes are kind of like precursors to endogenous cannabinoids. So
Okay.
like if you're deficient in omega threes, you probably won't, like, this is what some research is suggesting, you probably won't have an adequate production of endogenous cannabinoids. And there's actually one study where they found an omega-3 deficiency actually abolished the CB1 and CB2 receptors. So that means they stopped working.
Wow.
So yeah, so like part of it's taking cannabis, and then the other part of it's supporting your endocannabinoid system naturally,
Right,
as well. So then you'll get enhanced effects because you're targeting both areas.
got
right?
you. So
Yeah.
now, what happens if you're walking around and you're deficient in these areas? Is there any kind of like obvious side effects, or is it like a little bit more subtle?
So like there's Dr. Ethan Russo, who's been like a leading researcher in cannabinoids, especially on a molecular level, and terpenes too.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he coined the term clinical endocannabinoid deficiency. So
Say that again. What is it?
Clinical endocannabinoid deficiency.
Okay, got you.
Yeah.
Big word.
I could send you the study too if you want,
Please.
just so you can
Yeah,
look at
absolutely.
it. Yeah. But like the speculation is like some conditions like chronic migraines, fibro, those conditions that aren't necessarily just like they don't really know what's causing it.
Seriously,
Right?
because I'm not to cut you off. I'm sorry, but I am somebody who has suffered from chronic migraines in the past, where all of a sudden I'd have these spells for 3-4 weeks, a month, where I'm getting these migraines every single day as soon as I wake up, to the point where the pain is so intense. If you're listening, if you've had migraines that get so intense, you actually throw up, like, because your body just doesn't know what the hell's going on. And I get all these tests done, blood work, MRIs, all these scans, and the doctors are like, we don't know, bro. Here's some, and this is the messed up part. The neurologist I'm going to is like, yeah, sorry, we don't really know, but here's some antidepressants that help with migraines. And I'm like, okay. At that point, I was desperate. I wanted the pain to stop. So I was like, give me these. I forget what it was exactly, but apparently the type of antidepressants helps with migraines. And like, sure, maybe it did. But I noticed it's so weird what these chemicals do to your brain chemistry, because all of a sudden I just felt like I was a zombie, man. I was always sluggish. I was always tired. I could sleep 9 hours and wake up tired. So I just knew that this stuff wasn't good for me. So I weaned myself off, made some lifestyle changes, started eating better, eating cleaner, and like, here we are a few years later, and I'm fine. So do you think, because at the same time I was using cannabis regularly, but it didn't, if anything, here's where my question is. Does it depend on the person? Because sometimes I'll find that if I have a headache and I ingest cannabis, it'll almost exacerbate it. So does it depend on the person?
Yeah, there's two sides to that. I think there's definitely the genomic or genetic side, but then there's also the like really just maybe not using the right cannabis product. Right?
Okay.
So like when you're looking at like for a long time we've bred cannabis to have high concentrations of THC, right?
Yes.
But that's one of hundreds of different phytochemicals in the plant, right? So when you look at research, like especially for more of a medical approach, like, so let's take like chronic pain, right? So they found products that had even ratios of THC and CBD to be more efficacious or work better than just high THC products or THC by itself. And that's because CBD kind of regulates the CB1 receptor that THC binds to. So the side effects that people get from THC, like paranoia or anxiety or lethargia, and sometimes like increased pain, because sometimes more THC can actually make your pain worse, right?
Okay.
CBD kind of mitigates all of that. So it's trying to figure out like which product is right. And then also like I alluded to in the first point, which product's right for your genetics, right? Because everyone metabolizes cannabis differently. And we're it's interesting because medicine in a whole is taking a more of a precision medicine approach, right?
Totally.
So analyzing your genetics and figuring out like, oh, this medication won't even work for you because you have this genetic expression, right?
Wow.
Then with cannabis, like it has to be personalized, because we could have, like, say we both have generalized anxiety disorder, and I may take like 10 milligrams of CBD in an oil and be great. And then you may take 10 and not even touch your anxiety, right? So it's because we probably either metabolize CBD differently, And then there's also like, what are your coping mechanisms? What are your lifestyle factors? So like one thing we always talk about with patients is like, say you have chronic pain and inflammation, and then you take CBD to help your inflammation, but then you're drinking like 7 cans of Coca-Cola every day, which is causing a ton of inflammation.
Right.
You're like, it's battling. So like you really, it's not an end all be all. Like you have to facilitate the healing as much as taking something. And that's the other issue is like, we all want to take something and feel better, right? But it's deregulation takes a while and re-regulation takes a while. But if you like focus on healing and use these plant-based medicines and integrate it into your life and make lifestyle changes, like true healing occurs. Like I've seen hundreds of patients who've like from all walks of life, from people without a home who are dealing with substance use issues to like the 75-year-old elderly lady with chronic pain who once they integrate it and know what to take, in what form, at what time, at what dose, it's profound how it can change their life.
Yeah. Right? And I like what you said, where it has to be personalized, and you almost have to build a lifestyle around it, because so often people are like, I don't feel good, I want this pill, it's going to make me feel better. But that's really just a Band-Aid. You're not really healing yourself. So you almost have to like cultivate a lifestyle that is pro-healing, where I don't feel so great, so I'm going to maybe use some cannabis or some CBD, but I'm also going to eat better. I'm also going to watch what I'm not only putting into my body, but putting into my optic nerve, what I'm consuming in terms of television and books and music. And then when you kind of bring all those together, like that's where the real healing comes. These chemicals, whether they be cannabis or psilocybin or LSD, they're just tools that you have to kind of build up with, not just this is the end all be all cure. You're good. You're healed. You're all fine.
Exactly, man. It's taking a multifaceted approach, right? Like looking at the medical or biological, but also the psycho-spiritual too, right? And like if you look at more like indigenous teachings of plant use, right? Like it's about respecting the plant too, and not like just using it, right? And when we look at it, it's a little bit more apparent with psychedelic assisted trials and stuff like that, because you need to, the most important part is the integration, not just the experience, because if you don't actually change anything in your life, nothing will actually change. You'll just go from trip to trip or high to high, and although like you'll feel much better during those periods of time, and depending on what you're dealing with, like if you have stage 4 cancer or you're in such severe chronic pain, like obviously at that point you're just trying to feel a little bit better, right? But yeah, for sure, man, it's so important to have integration and to look at, why am I using this, and like you said, like what are you doing after you take, say, a little bit of CBD? Are you like watching endless episode reruns of TV for a week straight, or are you meditating, exercising, going for a walk, taking cold showers, like things that harness your own body's like natural healing abilities to move forward, right? But it's hard. It's a lot of conditioning.
Yeah, it is. It's unlearning everything you've really been led to believe is true and how life is supposed to go. But that's why these chemicals, specifically psychedelics, are so important, because they let you break these patterns and kind of for these X amount of hours almost step outside of them, kind of see it from a higher level of consciousness. And then after the experience is over, you are presented with a choice. You can evolve or remain. And I was listening to Joe Rogan last night where he was talking about this very thing, where you take psychedelics and it's almost like you defrag your whole computer. You wipe it clean, you redo the operating system, you upgrade it, everything, all your crazy files and screenshots, they're all put in one folder. And that folder, he said, is labeled "my old bullshit." And then after the trip, you decide everything is all nice and tidy up here. You can either go back to my old bullshit, those old patterns that aren't really helping you get anywhere, or you can, because the psychedelic doesn't care either way. It just wants to kind of show you the bigger picture. So yeah, man, I just think that in that regard, when they're used in that with that shamanic intention, because that's how I've always really used them, because I understood very quickly. LSD was the first for me for many years. And I understand very quickly, like, oh, you can't mess around with these. Like, you can't just, like, go to a party and get trippy on psychedelics, because it'll humble you. You know, you have to respect them, and they have to be used in these ways where they teach you things. You know what I mean? They're almost like their own form of intelligence, and they will humble you if you want to get cocky with them. And that's where like the air quotes bad challenging trip comes from, is when you try to control the experience and you're not really with the right people or in the right environment. That's when it gets crazy.
Yeah, set and setting is so important because like the thing is you're gonna face things that you're terrified of.
Right.
Right. Especially in those heroic doses or deep shamanic experiences. Like
Yeah.
they'll show you parts of your psyche that you've suppressed or not addressing or that
Right.
you've lost connection with, right? And it is like if you're at a party while that's happening, like that's just a recipe for disaster.
Right.
Right.
Right. Especially because you have psychedelics, which are their own category. I don't really know another word to kind of, we'll say they're enlightening. Okay. You have like this thing that makes you feel enlightened, for lack of a better term. And you're at a party with other people who are consuming alcohol, which is a depressant. And this is a fun fact. I don't drink alcohol anymore. I've really slowly backed away from that because it's been used as a tool to suppress human consciousness. We were a psychedelic-based society, and we switched to an alcohol-based society. We started migrating. We have these psychedelic mushrooms in particular that we were preserving in honey, and then that leads to fermentation, which leads to alcohol, and then we've switched to alcohol-based society. But when you're around people who are under the influence of alcohol, which is a suppression of consciousness. Alcohol comes from the Arabic word al-kul, which literally translates to body-eating spirit, right? Wine and spirits. Super interesting, right? So when you're on these psychedelics, the last thing you want to be around is like drunk people. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like the exact opposite of what you're trying to accomplish.
And you sense their darkness.
Yeah.
That's like the scary thing about those experiences too. And it's like it really boils down to like in a way like communication, right? On a macro and micro level, because what psychedelics facilitate is communication, either between your unconscious and conscious, or even like on a neurobiological level when you look at like how many new neurological connections are formed, or the hyperconnective state of the brain during the psychedelic experience, all that communication occurring. And then even when you look at microdosing psychedelics, right?
Yeah.
That the communication it facilitates with you and other people.
Yeah.
In the relationships. There's a organization in Canada actually that's been advocating for patient access to psilocybin. So they actually got some applications accepted from the health minister of Canada. So some end-of-life cancer patients were able to go through legally psychedelic psychotherapy. And it was fascinating, like just hearing one of their stories, because in his experience, he was being pulled by a horse, right? And the horse like dragged, literally could not do anything. And the horse was cancer, right?
Wow.
And then he just had this realization that he actually could get on top of the horse. So it's dragging him to this cliff, and he gets on top of it. And all of a sudden he pulls it away from the cliff. And he's like, I have no idea where I'm headed now, but at least I'm rotting with cancer rather than being dragged.
Wow. That's so powerful.
Right. And the next day, like, so for months before this, I think my understanding was that like his relationships with his family, his wife, his kids were like really at distance, but the next day he was hugging them, right, and embracing them, and just it's really relating to the issue of our society, which is communication, right? Lack of transparency, fear of vulnerability, like and just being ego driven and not your authentic self, and just being like, hey, I'm me. It's okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and just self-love. So I think it's socially, like from a microdose level and a macrodose, it could definitely change the world if you had widespread use in an educated way. Like
100%.
Education is the most important part.
Yeah, absolutely. My friend Tom and I on the last podcast talked a little bit about where there should be places where you can go if you want to have a psychedelic experience. You would be able to go there and there'd be people there. I use the word professionals, which I shouldn't have used. I should have used the word like shaman, like a shaman type person. Because anytime you mix, like, I think it would be weird if I go to like your average doctor's office with the xenon lights on the white walls and the people in the blue scrubs to take a psychedelic. I think that'd be a weird combination. You know what I mean? Yeah, so it would be nice if there were places where you can go where there are professionals and people who can guide you and educate you. but it's almost in like a non-clinical setting in terms of the visual environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like the setting has to be therapeutic for
Yes,
the
thank you.
individual. Yeah, 100%, man. And I think merging like both the shamanic with modern medicine,
Yeah,
because the hardest part too is like translating things into populations of people that need it most, but would never go to like a shaman,
right.
right?
Right.
Like those individuals need psychedelics the most,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But how do you get them to feel comfortable or
Yeah.
like to buy in and to try and to bridge that gap, right?
Right.
So it's hard because you have to bridge both, and
Yeah.
then if you can bridge them and unite them, then those people after they hopefully after, because I guess you can't generalize it, after that experience, then they would see change,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. Because even the term shaman has like a certain level of silliness to it. Like, oh, I'm gonna go see a shaman and eat mushrooms. Come on, get out of here. But like, so with you're right. There has to be some kind of bridge between the two where everybody can like kind of come together and experience that. Because I do, to bring it back to, you know, the cultivation of cannabis and what you were saying, how we're all, if we're genetically, we're all different. So therefore the cannabis has to almost be cultivated in a certain way to fit that. So when you were saying it could have been the kind of cannabis I was ingesting that wasn't helping with the headaches, if there is anything beautiful about the legalization of these compounds, is that now they're cultivated in these like controlled environments where they can maximize certain elements of these compounds to maybe make this much CBD or this much potency here or there. And that's almost like a, how do I want to put it? It's like a personalized version of it to fit you and your genetics.
Exactly, man. So medical cannabis has been legal in Canada for about 19 years now.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Really? I didn't know that was
yeah,
that long.
so
That's
it
amazing.
just kind of really got very a lot more momentum probably in the last 5 years.
Right.
There's probably close to 500,000 medical cannabis patients now in Canada, and ironically, the majority of them are between the age of 50 and 80, like the baby
Wow.
boomer generation. Yeah,
Okay.
so 'cause as people get older, they have more health issues, right?
Right.
And then retail adult use cannabis has been legal for about 2 years now in Canada. So that came later. But yeah, I 100% agree with regulation. You have standardization and you have controls. So
Yeah.
every product that's sold, first it's tested for what's in it. So
Mm-hmm.
what cannabinoids, THC, CBD, CBG, CBN,
Mm-hmm.
etc. are in it, what terpenes. So it's a lot, I think not a lot of people talk about, but it is the future of cannabis is terpenoids or terpenes.
Okay. Could you explain a little
Um,
bit what that is?
yeah, so like on a basic level, each strain smells different, right?
Yes.
And tastes different. So some are like citrusy, some are piney, some
Mm-hmm.
are earthy, skunky. So those are terpenes, which really is just essential oils of a plant.
Right.
So every plant has terpenes. So that's what produces the aroma of a plant. So lavender, for example, which is known to have some anti-anxiety effects, is high in a terpene called linalool. So linalool has a very floral scent to it. There's actually cannabis strains that are high in linalool too. So if you have a
Wow.
high linalool, high CBD strain, it's probably gonna be really good for anxiety,
Wow. Does
right?
it smell like lavender a little bit?
Yeah,
Wow.
floral. So
Wow.
and then there's
Wow.
limonene, which is in citrus fruits. It's also in cannabis. So those very citrus smelling strains,
Mm-hmm.
high in limonene, or there's
Wow.
terpinol, I think it's called, which is kind of like a lemony piney scent, so like kind of like pine sol. Myrcene, which is in hops and mangoes, it's in cannabis. So myrcene's sedative. So we used to look at, or we still do, but it's kind of shifting, especially in Canada. We used to look at cannabis as like indica sativa hybrid,
Yes.
um, but it's hard because like you may have Jack Herrera that traditionally was a sativa, but like after cultivating it through all these generations and all these growers, now maybe it has terpenes that more lead to an indica, right? So
Wow.
looking at the terpene profile is how you actually know. So a lot of products sold in Canada on the producers' websites, they'll show the cannabinoids, but also like a pie graph of terpenes. So it's like a strain that's like 65% say myrcene is probably going to like put you in a couch lock or be really good for sleep from a
Right.
medicinal perspective. Strains high in limonene, really good for like energy and depression. Pinene's really good for focus, those super piney smelling strains.
Okay.
So you look at terpenes and cannabinoids, and then those things all interact together, which is called the entourage effect. So that essentially means that you have all these compounds in cannabis, and they can modulate each other, enhance one another, mitigate the side effects of another, and produce a more robust effect. So that's kind of the next era, is really studying like, okay, if we have like these 3 terpenes in this cannabinoid and we cultivate it for that, like what condition does this help for? Or like what genetics are these good for? So yeah, we're still like in elementary school when it comes to cannabis, right? Like
Yeah,
there's
seriously.
so much to learn, and you also have to be careful because you don't want to isolate stuff too much, right? You still want to work within, I at least this is my perspective, like still work within natural conditions in a way where you are trying to cultivate certain strains that may have those compounds in them, rather than say grow THC on yeast, right? And like in a more pharmaceutical way, kind of produce it that way, because you're mitigating again that entourage effect when you start only having single compound products, right? So
Yeah.
even concentrates, right? Like concentrates that have terpene profiles will be much better than just a straight isolate, right? Because you're just getting THC by itself with no modulation of anything else, right? And that's not to say like don't ever take those products, but if you're like dabbing 20 times a day every day, high THC isolate, it's probably not going to benefit you in the long run.
Yeah,
right?
definitely not. You won't get nothing. You won't get anything done.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, you are really giving me a whole newfound appreciation for cannabis and the byproducts of it, because I always thought, it's indica, sativa, and or hybrid, but it seems like it goes way deeper than that, and it really depends on the kind of terpenes it is to really determine the use and the I guess end result for them.
Yeah, 100%. And then it's what form it's in too, right? Like oral, like when you ingest oil, like that's really great for like prolonged relief, because most likely it'll last around 8 hours, right? But if you're having like a panic attack, you can't wait like an hour for the oil to kick in, right?
Right.
So that's where like vaporizing, because you need just a straight 20% CBD strain, which won't get you high, but will definitely take your anxiety away very quickly, right?
Right. Now, when you eat something like an edible, it's produced by your liver, and it creates something called 11-hydroxy metabolite, correct?
Yeah.
11-hydroxy metabolite?
The THC, yeah.
Yeah, and it's, what is it, 5 times stronger than that if you smoke it?
Like probably like some people even speculate like 100 times stronger, right? So that's
Makes
why
sense.
like if you can smoke a 1 gram joint, that's 20% THC, so that equates to 200 milligrams of THC.
Okay.
And then if you ate 200 milligrams of THC, you're probably going to be high for 8 hours, like locked to the couch. Right?
So then, no, go ahead. Finish your thought. I'm sorry.
It's all on how it's made too, right?
Yeah.
That's the issue when you don't have regulated products, because you don't actually know how much it was decarboxylated, how much was absorbed, what's the bioavailability of it. Like there's so many levels of that too, right?
Right.
So,
are there certain things that can be mixed with these, I guess when they're like cooking it up or when they're making these edible products? Are there certain things, maybe herbs or chemicals, that can be mixed to create a higher yield? For example, I try to ingest turmeric. I know it's really good for anti-inflammatory, tastes really yummy. It's great for food. But what they don't really tell you, and what a lot of people don't know, is if you also have some black pepper with that turmeric, you absorb like 1,000% more turmeric. Like like your yield of turmeric absorption goes up. So is there something that these people mix with the cannabis to almost create like a bigger yield or better absorption?
Yeah, so it depends first in like the route of administration. So if we're just strictly talking about edibles like oral ingestion, fats. So cannabinoids love fats; they're fat loving.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure the bioavailability. So if you just ate cannabis, the bioavailability is probably like 2%. That's why you don't really get high if you eat just straight cannabis, right?
Like the nug.
Yeah, it also has to be decarboxylated. So what that means is you have to heat it up just enough because in raw cannabis you have what's called THCA and CBDA.
Okay.
So they're cannabinoid acids. They're not actually intoxicating. Like THCA doesn't produce a high.
Oh,
But
wow.
when
So
you,
they're non-psychoactive.
so they're psychoactive but non-intoxicating. So
Okay.
there's a
Okay.
distinction because it still may affect the brain but not actually produce intoxicating effects,
Oh,
right?
okay.
Yeah, so it's because some people say CBD is non-psychoactive, but it is. It's just non-intoxicating, right?
Mm,
There's a
right.
difference.
Yeah, because I've
Yeah,
only heard them say it's CBD, it's legal, it's non-psychoactive, but I definitely have taken CBD or smoked CBD, and I'm like, I definitely feel something's going on here.
yeah, it targets the 5-HT1A serotonergic receptor. Like it definitely changes chemistry in the brain, right?
Wow.
So yeah, but yeah, so like fats, I think the bioavailability goes up to at least 50% when you add it with a fat from
Okay.
3%. And then that's kind of like where new formulations come. So when you can convert cannabinoids, which are fat loving and not water loving, to water loving molecules,
Right.
and then you hold it under your tongue, or even do like rectal suppositories, the bioavailability gets very, very high. The highest form of bioavailability, from my understanding, is vaporization.
Okay.
So when you smoke cannabis, you only absorb about 20 to maybe 50% of what you're smoking. So say the strain's 20% THC, you're really only getting 20 to 50% of that 20%. So it's actually really
Wow.
wasteful
Yeah.
to smoke cannabis. But when you vaporize it, there's been a study that looked at the Volcano, the Riser Solo, the PAX.
Yeah.
The bioavailability is anywhere from 70 to 89%. So you almost, so
Huh.
if you were like vape half a gram and then smoke half a gram, you would get double the amount of THC actually absorbed into your body by vaporizing over smoking.
Wow. Is it almost like the carbon in the smoke kind of breaks down certain things you would otherwise absorb? Is that why?
It's the temperature of the flame. The heat of the flame is so high that it destroys some of the molecule, because the
Yeah.
melting points of a lot of compounds in cannabis is only around like anywhere from I think 200 degrees Fahrenheit to 400.
Okay.
And a flame is much hotter than that, like upwards of 700 or 900
Oh,
degrees Fahrenheit.
wow.
So when you
Huh.
vaporize cannabis, say at like 390 degrees Fahrenheit, you won't destroy those compounds as much. Plus, that cannabis you vape, you can save and then infuse that into say coconut oil afterwards, and then make a topical out of it or
Right.
something. So it's kind of a less, I like to say, like from a spiritual perspective, a less violent way of consuming
Right.
cannabis, and then it's
Right.
also like you're recycling the use of it and kind of honoring it more that way too.
Wow.
Right?
That's amazing, man. What a wonder plant. Seriously, just like cannabis and hemp as a plant, and everything that you can yield from it, whether it be paper or textiles or even hempcrete, concrete made with hemp. Like, it's a wonder plant, man. Seriously. And it's all because what was his name? The dude who had the paper company in the United States who like try to outlaw hemp. What was his name?
I don't remember his name, but I know the theory. Yeah. So just, I really like all cannabis prohibition stems from racism, right? And also like big business.
Yeah.
So there were like especially in American history and Canadian history, when you look at the groups of people that were targeted, who primarily use those substances, so may that be the hippie psychedelic movement or targeting Black and other communities, right, based off of the substances, like especially in the Motown era and the beatnik era when cannabis was heavily used, and then you'd have people saying that they're trying to lure white women and get them high, and then when they're high, they'll be scandalous, and the reefer madness and all this stuff. But I'm pretty sure there was a like a news agent for Nixon or Reagan, I can't remember, but he came out saying like, we knew we couldn't like arrest people for being Black or arrest people for being hippies, but we could prosecute them based off of the substances they were using.
Yeah.
And you look at the scheduling of drugs, and like the most like safe drugs almost have the harshest penalties against them, and some of the most dangerous, I'd say, soul-sucking drugs have less penalties against them, right?
Yeah, so if not any. You can go to the store right now and buy alcohol and like
No, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's crazy, man. But I definitely think we're moving further away. We're getting closer to legalizing those compounds that have been kept from us, because there's a consciousness shift, and as more and more people start to wake up to the amazing qualities and healing potential that these compounds have, well, of course, more people are going to want that. It's just this weird war between like the pharmaceutical companies that run the world and like the people who are trying to actually make the world a better place. I was having this conversation today with a friend who's actually going to school for nursing, and
Mhm.
I forget what he said specifically, but the point I made was like, well, yeah, dude, well, he was saying how like it's crazy how they're making this COVID vaccine so fast, but like they haven't cured AIDS or they haven't cured cancer, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, yeah, dude, a cured patient is a customer lost. So like, of course, it's just this weird, creepy business that keeps us like in the loop to just keep, again, it's like almost like a war on consciousness, really.
Yeah, and it's, you know what, like it's such a battle to figure out like what it is really. Like, are these malevolent people like behind the scenes who are like, let's like destroy humans' lives and make a bunch of money, or is it
Yeah.
really just like a bunch of business people thought of a business model that would make a lot of money,
Yeah.
and unfortunately it's really unethical,
Yeah.
but they just did it, and
Yeah.
it got so much power so quickly that the world oriented around it. And it's really up to, I think, younger populations to look long term, especially not just short term, and like how can we create new models of, say, business or societal models that have ethical principles involved with them,
Yeah.
right? So the main, you're right, the main issue with medicine is that most of it's banked off of either time, number of patients, or how many drugs are dispensed.
Yeah.
Like those are the main revenue drivers for a lot of medical professionals, right?
Yeah.
But if you could create like a medical ecosystem where that wasn't the main driver, like maybe the main driver was like the well-being of the patient
Yeah.
for ad revenue, then the incentive would be way different.
Mhm.
But to gap that's so hard, and then to dismantle the framework that's been created, like it's definitely, I always think anything's possible. Like I'm undying optimistic,
Totally.
right? But you need a lot of people to come together collectively
Yeah.
and to really try,
Yeah.
right? And involve their hearts into it to make things like that happen. So
Yeah, man. Well, here we are. You know, I'm sitting here in New Jersey. You're in Canada, and you said that
yeah,
it's been medically legal for 19 years in Canada. As of a few weeks ago, it's just been legal in New Jersey. Like, we're finally starting to catch on. And then they're also trying to add psilocybin to that list. And it's just really, really exciting. It's like a small step, but it's like relatively, that's like a huge step, especially with psychedelic mushrooms.
yeah, it's crazy how fast society adapts. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like how like 2 years ago we had no retail stores, and I live in Winnipeg. Now you have tons of retail stores. You can place order online, they'll come to your house, deliver it between 6 to 10, all legal, all
Wow.
government supplied. Like, do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's just normal now.
Yeah.
And all it took was a simple policy change,
Mm-hmm.
businesses opening, and then okay, it's normal.
Yeah.
Let's then like so like it's this weird like linearity too in our society to always look at things in a linear fashion, right? Like
Right.
that we have to like move like this ever so often, right?
Right.
Instead of like, no, we go here and here and there
Mm-hmm.
and there and this and there and like see what happens, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's super exciting. I'm super excited for you and for New Jersey, man, because like that's a huge step forward,
Yeah.
right? Just to start involving, and it also creates business and jobs
Exactly.
and an exciting industry and growth, right? So
Exactly, man. You know, as Onwards grows and I grow and the story changes, like, you know, it's always been bigger than just, you know, I see you got your awesome hoodie there, man. First
yeah,
ever Onwards garment in Canada, man. That's awesome. But as you know, it's always been bigger than just clothing. It's just how can we shift as a collective into greater states of consciousness and greater states of living and being and acting in the world? And I think that a key to getting there is the help of psychedelics to kind of let us evolve our consciousness. Because,
mhm,
you know, the bicycle has many, many meanings, like, you know, Albert Hoffman first synthesizing LSD and then Bicycle
yeah.
Day and all these things. So, because if it wasn't for those experiences, you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking. You know what I mean? And Onwards probably wouldn't exist. And I don't know what I'd be doing with my life. And that's kind of freaky. It freaks me out to think like that, because you are always one decision away from a completely different life. And if I never went to my friend's house that one night, and you know what I mean, the rest is history. So and I'm sure they've helped you a lot. They've helped me and my friends and family so much. And just because,
Yeah, like it's crazy how fast like your life manifests when you do make those choices to follow, I think, a greater truth, right? Like 5 years ago, I never would have thought I'd be like working high up in a cannabis industry, meeting
yeah,
people who are potentially legalizing psilocybin. Like that's a dream to
yeah,
work with those medicines, but like it happened, right? Just
hmm,
because you took those steps and said yes, like
yeah,
yes, I'll do it. Yes, I'll do this. And there's this. I think it was Terrence McKenna who said nature rewards courage, right? So like I
mm,
think when you follow something authentic and you know it's deep down inside, you're trying to help a lot of people or inspire or collectively inspire change, like the universe will facilitate it somehow, like one way or another. And yeah, man, like I'm in Canada and I stumbled upon your page one day and I was like, this embodies everything I believe in. This is awesome. This whole clothing company. And like I've watched it for a long time,
yeah,
right? And no connection other than the internet.
yeah.
But because you embody something with integrity and that's trying to help people and facilitate consciousness and awareness, like people will just gravitate to it, right?
Awesome, brother. I'm so glad you touched on that, because I was very curious on how you found out about Onwards, because it's just like, who's this man? Who's this guy in Canada? And he's so positive and he's so supportive and like he wants to order stuff. What? Like, that's crazy. And now here we are talking.
Yeah.
So that's awesome, man. I love that.
That's all. It's all about integrity, man. I think as long as you have your integrity, like even if you're taking things slow, like it's better to do a turtle race with integrity than to like rush and
100%.
compromise your values, right? Because
100%.
people will, especially in this day and age, people will gravitate to something that embodies truth, right? So
100%. And that's always what I've wanted to do, was just kind of be that vehicle for light and truth, and just kind of, because when you do that and you are authentically yourself and you're really not afraid, and like you said, nature rewards that, you give other people the permission to do the same thing, because you don't know how many people are out there who, because I was one of those people who was lost, not really sure what I should do, kind of following the crowd, playing it safe. And then when I took psychedelics and realized that there's a whole bigger picture going on, and, you know, they helped me figure out who I am truly and what I came here to do. It's almost like this noble, how do I want to say it? It's, I'm blanking on the word, but when you step into that, it gives other people the permission. And then that's really how you really change the world. 'Cause then they're their authentic selves, and then they inspire other people, and it's just like this crazy ripple effect that happens.
it's like a transition from like someone else living your life for you and then like actually serving, like
Yes,
serving,
yes,
like not feeling like you're like, oh, I'm waking up and doing this today, like literally having immense gratitude, like I'm so happy I get to do this,
yeah,
I'm so happy I get to serve, and thank you.
yeah,
Like just having that mind state. And yeah, it's for young people, man, it's hard. It's so hard to like find something that you feel is in line with your soul and
yeah,
that like you're contributing to. And a lot of people struggle. I see it all the time, and I've been there too. Like definitely who I am now. When I was 8 years ago, when I was 20, I was not in who I am now.
right,
Right.
right,
And you may make a lot of mistakes, but for me too, it was psychedelics that like really changed my life. I had like a really deep experience that taught me to let go,
yeah,
right? And to surrender, and that there is an unconditional love always surrounding you, and that like you will be protected.
yeah,
And even if you're not, like there's always some lesson in all of suffering, right?
yes,
Like it's kind of like a Buddhist view, but
mm-hmm,
it's innately, and like I think the psychedelic experience too is like accepting and letting go and embracing,
100%.
right? So
Somebody said this. I saw a video where they were specifically talking about DMT, but I think it relates to all psychedelics, where it's like taking a psychedelic is like jumping out of a plane without a parachute. But as soon as you let go, you're met with a bed of feathers. And when he said that, I was like, that is so true, because as soon as you just let go, because what happens when you take psychedelics is your ego is dissolved, but there's always a small part of your ego that's really trying to hold on. I feel it every time I take a psychedelic, where the moments and minutes leading up to me actually ingesting it, I have this like sense of anxiety and like, oh, I don't know if I should, this isn't probably the right time. And a few weeks ago, I pinpointed, I was like, that's the ego trying to hold on because it knows it's about to get obliterated. And I've been around other people who are on psychedelics, but their ego's strong and it just doesn't want to let go. And that's where the proverbial like bad trip comes from, because they're trying to control what the psychedelic is trying to help them heal through. That's why, like you said earlier, when you take psychedelics, a lot of the times why people avoid it and may have a challenging experience is because they walk around suppressing trauma or fear, insecurities. And the psychedelic, when your ego, that's your ego. When your ego is dissolved, there's nothing but truth and love. And a lot of the times the truth can hurt. So, but at the same time, the psychedelic's only bringing these things up so you can face them and deal with them, transcend them, and then heal, and then go about your life being a better ultimate version of yourself. And it's just a shame that a lot of people wish to avoid that experience because they don't want to fucking have to deal with some shit that happened when they were 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know it's tough, like, because the pain is unbearable for some people, right?
Absolutely.
Like, I know how deep that wound is, and you know, it's the human unconscious is fascinating. Like, I don't know if you've heard of Stanislav Grof before, but
No.
I think he coined transpersonal psychology, and it was really looking at the spiritual view. But he did hundreds of LSD psychotherapy assisted sessions, and really spent a lot of time with schizophrenic patients too, which is very fascinating. Because schizophrenia is almost like a permanent psychedelic trip, right? You can't touch, you don't touch back to reality. You're just always in the trip.
Yeah.
And which does not work in our society. But it's even your dreams, man. Like, your unconscious is always trying to tell you in one form or another, like, look, this behavior pattern, if you keep doing this, like, it's going to lead to something really bad, or like, that's why you have this anxiety, but like it's blocked. And then in the psychedelic experience, it opens it right up. Right. And like, for me, like, the life-changing experience I had was hell at first. Like, I thought my friend was going crazy, and I was convinced he's going to murder me tonight. Right. So I'm on the fetal position in one couch. He's on the fetal position on the other couch. The music is like whispers now in my ear. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to call the cops. Like, my ego is just like trying to maintain as much control. And I just heard a voice that was like, you just have to let go. And I was like, what? And it's like, you just have to let go. And then it's just like that click, that moment where it clicks. And I just jumped, and I was like, I just have to let go. I was so happy because all my panic, all my terror, all my fear just evaporated. Because the light came out and like hugged me, and you felt free. Right. But all you're really free of is just like trying to control everything in your life. Right. And always trying to manipulate. Right. And calculate. And sometimes, like Ram Dass said, like, you just be. You just have to be.
Just be here now. Yeah, man. I've been around, you know, even the challenging trips, there's always something to be learned. I've been around, you know, family and very close friends when they were having a challenging time on a psychedelic, and it was, in the moment, it's scary and you feel bad for them, and they're throwing up and they're rolling around, and it's like they're trying to get this weird energy out of them. And, you know, you'll ask them today and they'll say that was one of the most important moments of their entire life, even though it was incredibly in the moment scary and somewhat traumatic. Like, they needed that, and it was really important on the journey of becoming who they are. You know what I mean? And here's like a quick little story to kind of set the stage and give a really good example. My brother, he had one on, it was July 1st, 2017. So the numbers were 7117. It was such a powerful day that's the password to his phone.
Wow.
And this is actually to tie it back in with cannabis, because I think it's important, if you're going to consume a psychedelic, you have to do it in itself. Don't mix it with anything, because it can definitely make it weird. And so I don't think I was under the influence of psychedelics that day, but he was, particularly LSD. And then all of a sudden he finds himself taking like several bong hits, which is like a lot, especially if you're on a psychedelic. And all of a sudden, you know, we're sitting in my room, we're just hanging out. I think I had I had the Iron Giant on. We were just watching it. And then outside, clouds start rolling in. A storm starts rolling in. And at the same time, a storm starts rolling in my brother, like on like a conscious level. Like, a storm is also rolling. It was very symbolic how this whole day laid out.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, it gets real dark out. And the thunderstorm's rolling in. He looks at me, and I can see the fear in his eyes. He's like, I'm tripping really hard. It's like, ah, shit. Turn the movie off. Lights come on. Like, we're trying to fix them. I don't know to this day what he was really going through, but there was some kind of energy that he was just trying to release, some energy that no longer served him. And when you're on these psychedelics, they want to help you do that. So how do they help you do that? Through purging. They're going to make you throw up or, maybe like get sick to your stomach. So that's kind of how they help you get rid of these energies, right? So there's a horrible thunderstorm outside. He's going through he's like going through the ringer, dealing with it. Finally, he's able to purge, throw up, let this energy out. He feels so amazing. At the same time, the storm goes away. We go outside. It's sunny, and there's a double rainbow across the sky. It was like so symbolic, and it just fit together, and it was very synchronistic. And it was just like the perfect example of like, even though it was really scary and bad, the sun will come out and the rainbows will shine, man. Like it's always going to help you on the journey.
It is. The synchronicities are so fascinating to me, man. Like I don't know what it is. Like I don't know what collective consciousness is happening with the planet. Like but like same like this one experience. A bunch of me and my friends were at like a campground, ate a bunch of mushrooms, got kicked out of the park, had to drive home peaking on mushrooms.
Oh no!
Horrible experience.
Oh my goodness!
I'm driving. My friend's like, hey man, if you need me to drive, just pull over. I pull over. I'm like, you have to drive. He's like, I can't drive, man. What are you talking about? So like, finally home, I'm just in the worst state possible. I'm like, I'm going to bed. Like I was convinced the cops were waiting for me at home. There's some joke they're playing on me, like all the paranoia.
Yeah.
And then my friend's like, just come for a walk. And I'm like, okay, fine. So we're walking. We get to this one street corner. Then all of a sudden, we haven't had contact with anyone else. All of a sudden, 2 other friends who were at the park just roll up. A friend we haven't talked to all night just rolls up. This girl and her boyfriend we went to elementary school just roll up, literally within 10 seconds. And then we just sat in a parking lot, watched the sunrise, and had like the best experience of our lives. But
that's awesome.
Synchronicity of us all meeting at the same time, just like in your experience too, the clouds going away, the rainbows being out.
Yeah.
Like the timing is just so weird and profound.
It definitely is, man. I got to tell you, and we talked about this last podcast where I feel like once you have a psychedelic experience and then wake up to the magic that's all around you, the universe is constantly trying to throw little winks your way and be like, look, it's all connected. We're watching.
Yeah.
Whether it be you look at the clock and it says 11:11, or, that's a big one for me, seeing a lot of repeating numbers. And then you can, of course, go and look up what those numbers symbolize, because numbers have their own vibration and meanings. And there's that, or, even a dragonfly lands on me in Florida, and then I'm seeing dragonflies every single day for weeks, and then all of a sudden I find a dead one, and then I preserve it in resin. It's over on the shelf over there, and then my friend, because I told this story in the last podcast, where my friend and I got each other the same exact dragonfly cards and the same exact notebooks from across the country on separate days. We got each other the same shit, and it's just the universe is always trying to give you signs of like it's all connected, and I wonder how often before psychedelics that was happening to me that I just had no idea. I was just like looking past it.
Yeah, like you wonder, like it's really hard because there's always like these 2 schools of thought, like science and spiritual, right? Yeah. So that the science deduces it to just reactions and equations and that, and then the spiritual is like the connected aspect, right? And yeah, like I don't know if it's that, like it's a combination of both. Like maybe the hyperconnected neocortex state of your brain in psilocybin, now you can communicate in ways that we don't even understand, that mushrooms communicate in nature naturally in this interconnected web of intelligence, right? And how are also, like throughout history too, how is one discovery made here on one side of the world, and then 2 hours later it's also just discovered at the same time, and like and it would have been so fascinating to have actual context in like more ancient societies or prehistoric cultures and seeing, and maybe we just misunderstand the symbology of their communication, and the psychedelic state they actually were in, right?
Yeah. So. Yeah, man. It is a beautiful thing once you wake up, with the help of psychedelics, just how magical life can be. Of course, everybody has their days and things aren't always all rainbows and butterflies, but it definitely helps you seeing these synchronicities after having psychedelic experience and know that the universe is conspiring for you. There's a term called pronoia. Are you familiar with pronoia?
No.
So there's paranoia,
Yeah.
And then there's pronoia, which is the idea that everything is conspiring to help you. The universe is conspiring to help you. And I love that term, pronoia. I always thought it'd be a cool like brand name, or the name of a podcast or something. But yeah, man, it's in that regard, you know, psychedelics can really help you understand like, wow, you know what, even though things might not be the greatest right now, I know it's all happening for a bigger plan, instead of, man, everything just sucks. Life is shit. I never win. You know what I mean? Like, there's that huge perspective shift that comes after the psychedelic experience. And maybe that's just what we need as a collective, man, is to have that kind of shift into a higher perspective. And then maybe, you know, things will start to really, really turn around at an accelerated rate.
Yeah, because we play, and it's ingrained in us, but we often play the victim mentality, just like you just said, right?
Yeah.
Like, all these things happen to me. I cannot change my life. Life is horrible.
Yeah.
Like, I've been given shit cards, like that type of mentality, instead of being a witness and being like, no, you know what? There's actually a blessing in this situation. Like, this taught me this. Now I know this. I'm not going to do that again. Right? Like, and I agree. And even if, like, that's also why microdosing psychedelics fascinates me, because we often trade, like, in our society, we trade either empathy for productivity or productivity for empathy, right? So people take like Adderall, cocaine, tobacco, caffeine to be more productive, but you become more irritable, tense, you don't want to talk to people.
Right.
And then you take ethnogens or psychedelics or cannabis, and a lot of times you're not going to want to do like an Excel budget spreadsheet while you're in those experiences.
Right.
But microdosing's like, you could be crunching numbers and be like, I love the universe at the same time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things I recognized on microdosing is because I've never been prescribed, or I've never been diagnosed rather, with ADD or ADHD, but I probably have some form of it if I were to like get tested or whatever. And I'm so glad I was never tested, and I'm so glad my parents never suppressed me with those kind of weird, because let's face it, it's meth. You're getting amphetamines, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just super glad that I was never given that, because my brain, I learned this. My brain is constantly moving so fast. I have all these ideas, and I'm changing projects. I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And then when I take a microdose, because for you, those of you listening and you're not familiar, when you ingest psilocybin mushrooms and even some edible mushrooms, lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, something in your brain happens that's called neurogenesis. And neurogenesis is when new brain cells are being formed, new neural networks are being created, different parts of your brain are communicating that otherwise wouldn't be communicating. So it's like that funny thing. It's like, this is your brain on drugs, and it's like a scrambled egg, but like, this is your brain on psilocybin, and it's like all lit up. And because you can look at graphs where, and I'll, for the video version, I'll throw a little info, the little visual aid of your brain activity, just regular, and then your brain activity on psilocybin. And it's all of these networks are connecting, and it's like it's like a spider web net of information and connectivity. So the whole idea behind microdosing is it's not enough to trip or have any weird physical, you don't really notice it, but it is enough to get that neurogenesis going. So for me personally, like you said, creating a spreadsheet, you are completely present and in the flow state when you're just in regular tasks, folding clothes, putting the laundry, or putting the dishes away. Like, you are fully there and fully present, and you're just in that flow state. And that's what it's enabled me to do, is really get focused and able to sit and say, okay, I have to do this. I don't really know how long it's going to take, but I'm cool with it. I'm here. We're here. We're present. It's almost like you're walking around for however long that microdose lasts in like a constant meditative state where you're fully present, you're fully aware, and you're just like super grateful to be alive and well, you know?
Exactly. And like, even the next day too, that effect lingers. And like, I like Dr. James Fadiman's protocol, where you every third day, right? Because it also like kind of takes away like the notion of requiring something every day, right? Like, that's the slippery slope. Like, every time now you feel anxiety, do you take a microdose? Right? Like, that's not integration.
Definitely not. Yeah.
But you're so right. Like, even just driving your car, like, you're like, oh wow, this thing drives so nice. Like you're so present and just grateful. And with humans, I noticed too, you could be walking on the street, some stranger comes up to you, you want to talk to them. Like, you actually feel a need to say, hey, how are you? Right? Rather than being just so like here in your view and not actually recognizing like just the collective
Yeah.
as altogether, right?
Yeah,
So,
or even silly things like someone in my family was out riding their bike in nature, mountain biking, and he comes home, he's like, I forgot how awesome trees were. You know, because
right.
he's on a microdose and he's all of a sudden, he's like, oh shit, I forgot about how awesome trees were. And you're just like, the quality of life is just enhanced a little bit because, you know, the neurogenesis really helps you. Your brain is all, it's hardwired. It's firing on all cylinders. So, of course, your experience is going to be better.
Yeah, and you're right too. It changes your perspective. Like my partner and I, like we often talk about like how much more we notice the sky, right? Like the clouds and like just the formations and the beauty of it, just from microdosing for periods of time, right? And yeah, like I think I think if our society orients itself to utilizing these things, you will see a huge difference. But it's interesting because I'd even argue pharmaceutical companies, if they were smart, they would get involved instead of like prohibit it, because if they want to be economically involved, get involved.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Because we saw what happened with marijuana. It especially like in Denver and Colorado, that real estate went up, crime went down, the economy was booming. Like, so that you would have thought, if they're all about making billions of dollars and extracting billions of dollars out of people, they would hop on that psychedelic therapy wave. You know what I mean? And that's to kind of bring it back to what I mentioned earlier, where Onwards is bigger than just, you know, clothes and cool art. Like it's about evolving consciousness. And as things like psilocybin are becoming, the laws are becoming a little bit more lax, that's something I could potentially see the direction of Onwards going, is being that vehicle for people. Like I think it sounds cool. I like the ring to it. The Onward Psychedelic Research Labs. I think that's dope. You know what I mean? So I definitely see that being part of the future of Onwards, whatever that may be, because of how much it's helped me, the people that I love, and just, you know, the world around us, and just me personally, the creativity and the wanting to give that to other people, you know?
Yeah, because you realize how much it's improved your relationships with yourself and other people in your own life and your life, and you want other people to experience that too. Like I even gave like a microdose to my parents, right? And they're like in their 60s, and my dad's like, I loved it. Like I was outside, I had energy, like the trees look nice, like and like even anyone from any walk of life will, from a microdose, probably will not experience a negative side effect. Right. Maybe increased anxiety, or you know what? Don't get me wrong. There's people who may have a predisposition to psychosis or other variant things that do have to be careful, because we don't collectively treat psychosis in a way that's conducive to help people. Right. We tend to just sedate individuals.
I will say there was one time when I took a microdose and decided to go to our local grocery store. And I definitely felt a little overwhelmed in there because of how much stimulus, how much was going on in terms of people everywhere. It was a particularly busy day, and I just remembered like feeling like I have to get the fuck out of here right now. I can't. There's too much going on. But other than that, it's been completely pleasant.
And that's why like it's such a powerful medicine, right? Because like taking like 200 milligrams of psilocybin and then taking 500, like it's not that bit of a difference, but it is in like what you'll experience. Like I remember like I lived in Toronto for a bit, and I used to weigh my own microdoses, right? And I took a little bit too much one day, and I'm sitting there right before like going into a big meeting, and I'm like, okay, you know, like my computer's kind of moving, but I'll do it anyway.
Are the walls waving? What's up? Yeah.
Right. So then you took too much though. Right. If someone's very naive, that could be a terrifying experience for them. Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. That's why I've kind of moved to putting it in capsules, where it's just, I know this is roughly about this much. We're good. It's a microdose. So yeah, man, it's so powerful. And it's funny you say your parents, because sorry, mom and dad, but I got my parents to try it too. And they have had incredible experiences. My dad came to me finally and he said, I understand the Alex Gray paintings now. I understand it. That was one of the coolest things I ever hear him say. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's just really beautiful. And then, you know, my parents, as they get older, they have issues that they're also facing, and these compounds are really helping them face them and helping them almost look at their past mistakes and understand where they were wrong. And it just there's like a sense of empathy and forgiveness, and it's beautiful to see that, you know, because I know my parents have walked around with these maybe ill feelings or, you know, towards certain things or situations, and the psychedelics, and as small as the doses may be, have really been helping them almost transcend and heal those past mistakes. So it's just been beautiful to see and also be a part of, you know?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful thing, man, to be able to see that in your parents, right? And to help them because
Yeah.
you love them,
Yeah.
right? And you want them to just like and the other thing is you don't want them to see them go down a route of like say they have chronic pain now. Like I don't want my parents on opiates and a bunch of GABA and then all these medications. I want them on CBD and THC, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's interesting too. Like once you see those changes, you see the lifestyle changes they make too, right?
100%.
Eating healthier,
100%.
going out for walks now, like just happier people.
100%.
Right?
One of the big things my dad cut out is watching the news every night.
Yeah.
Because we don't understand, like, the news is set up to just make you feel, because I noticed it when the election was happening a few weeks ago. I had the news on, and I noticed for 2 days I was very short-tempered. I had a ton of anxiety. I just was not liking my mental state. And I was like, oh my God, it's because I've been fucking watching the news, and the news is just feeding you negativity and biases and fear and all this other shit. And that's something that my dad was able to cut out of his life. He would watch that shit every night, like religiously. And now he doesn't. And now when he does put it on, he's like, damn, this shit is fucking negative. And then now instead he'll be watching a Joe Rogan podcast, or he'll be watching one of my podcasts. So it's just really cool to see, because their state of life and their mental states are now improved because of just something as small as, you know, a couple microdoses here and there, man. Their whole life is different.
Yeah, it's profound how bit of a change it can make. And on your point too, man, it's crazy those external influences, how subtle they could be, right?
Yeah.
Like not actually realizing like, oh, this is why my body feels more anxious today.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been watching like endless Instagram feeds of like COVID, right? Or like just I'm so insecure because all I look at is like 6-pack bodybuilders.
Right.
Like of course I don't feel good about my body.
Yeah.
but to actually make the connection, like it's social media or it's the news, and then to make the next step of stopping it, because it's so addictive. It's
so addictive.
All of it's developed to like get your attention.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah,
it's hard, but it's crucial definitely to create the environment that's conducive to how you want your mental state to be.
Yeah. Because your diet is more than just what you eat and drink. It's like I said earlier, it's what you watch, it's the music you listen to, it's the books you read, it's the things you talk about. You know, if you're with people who just want to gossip and talk shit all day, of course that's going to affect it flavors your view on life. You know what I mean? So it's just so important to just cultivate and surround yourself in people and environments and in activities that are going to ultimately be the best for your state of consciousness and well-being.
Yeah, it's probably the hardest thing, I think, for most people, but the most important thing.
Yeah, it is.
It's hard too when you see loved ones or friends and they're in those places, and you know, like it seems so easy, but it's like all you have to do is this, and you would change so much. But the hardest thing, I think, and it's a collective thing too, is like to figure out a way to turn lights on in people where they want to actually do that for themselves.
Yeah, man. Right? That's the whole point of this podcast. It's forward evolution. It's just we're planting these seeds of better ways of thinking, being, and acting into the world through these conversations. So way to bring it full circle, man. That's exactly it. You know, it's just about, because like you said, and this is what my friend Tom said, I'll quote him. I said something about you can only lead a horse to water. And he's like, I'm going to butcher it, but he said, is it by leading the horse to water, you have an expectation that it'll drink the water? Why don't you just make sure the water's good? And when he said that, I was like, wow, that's so true. But it is important to plant these little seeds in people's minds, because I could want something for somebody so much and try to give them all the tools that they need. But at the end of the day, it's got to be them who wants to do it. So I've switched to a place from just planting seeds and just speaking my truth, saying what's on my mind, and hopefully it rubs off on you. And if it doesn't, that's totally fine. I think people are only going to hear messages. They're only going to receive a message that they're at a vibrational match to, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, completely. And it can be really frustrating if you're just trying to help everyone, force, like drink my Kool-Aid, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a very peaceful place to come from, is like, do you, speak in truth,
Yeah.
put the tools out there, and then people will gravitate to them who need them.
100%.
Right? So, yeah.
Yeah, man. Evan, I think we should end on that, man. It's been an hour, 10 minutes. This has been awesome.
Yeah, it has been, man. It's been a great time.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much. Everybody for listening. Thank you guys. And we will see you next time.